a deep dive into the number-end SARS protests, the power of youth movements. In October 2020, Nigeria's youth stood up against decades of police brutality, igniting one of the most powerful and influential movements in the country's history. End SARS. What began as a hashtag soon erupted into a nationwide call for justice, shaking the very foundations of the Nigerian government. But this wasn't just about ending police brutality. It was a movement fueled by discontent, hope, and the power of youth. Welcome to today's video, where we'll dive deeply into the End SARS protests. We'll explore how Nigerian youths harnessed the power of social media, the truth behind the infamous Lekki toll gate massacre, and why this movement still matters, both in Nigeria and globally. Let's get started. Segment 1. Origins of End SARS. To understand End SARS, we need to go back to 1992. The Special Anti-Robbery Squad, known as SARS, was created to combat violent crime, robberies, kidnappings, and more. But instead of protecting citizens, SARS became infamous for its brutal methods: extortion, unlawful arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings. In 2017, Nigerians, particularly young people, took to social media to share their stories of SARS brutality. And with that, the hashtag End SARS was born. What was initially an online movement grew into a mass mobilization by 2020, when a video of SARS officers allegedly killing a young man went viral. This was the tipping point. Protests erupted across the country, but the heart of this movement, it wasn't just anger. It demanded real change, a fight against systemic abuse and bad governance. Segment 2. The role of social media. Now let's talk about social media, the true engine behind the hashtag End SARS movement. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook became the epicenter of mobilization. But this movement was different. It wasn't led by one figure or an organization. It was decentralized, with everyone contributing, organizing protests, sharing stories, and most importantly, demanding justice. It's important to note that this movement wasn't just local. Nigerian celebrities like Falz, Burna Boy, Mr. Macaroni, and Davido amplified the cause on a global scale. The hashtag End SARS trended worldwide, with people from London to New York showing their solidarity. Social media made this a global conversation. Segment 3. Youth Involvement and Organization. What made End SARS even more powerful was the unprecedented organization by Nigeria's youth. The protests weren't chaotic. Young Nigerians coordinated logistics, raised funds, provided medical supplies, and even organized legal aid for those who were arrested. A standout group during this period was the Feminist Coalition, which played a major role in fundraising and supporting protesters. It was a remarkable example of how a decentralized, youth-led movement can operate with military precision. There was no hierarchy, no clear leader, just collective action, fueled by a shared goal. The power of this was undeniable. This youth-driven movement wasn't just about ending SARS. It was a rejection of corruption, bad governance, and the stifling of opportunities for the younger generation. The protests were as much about a broken system as they were about police brutality. Segment 4. The Lekki toll gate episode. October 20th, 2020. This date is etched into the memories of millions of Nigerians as the day the End SARS movement turned tragic. Peaceful protesters at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos, armed only with the Nigerian flag, and their voices were met with violence. Security forces opened fire on the crowd. Live streams and videos from that night showed the brutality in real time. The Nigerian government initially denied involvement, but the evidence was clear. That night, known as the Lekki toll gate massacre, left the country in shock and sparked international outrage. Segment 5. The government's response. After the protests, the Nigerian government announced the dissolution of SARS, a key demand of the protesters, but the people were not convinced. Similar promises had been made in the past, and nothing changed. The government's response shifted from promises to repression. Mass arrests of protesters, the freezing of bank accounts linked to activists, and a full-scale crackdown on dissent. But the youth didn't back down. The protests may have been forcefully stopped, but their calls for justice and reform echoed far beyond October 2020. Segment 6. The aftermath and long-term impact. While the NSAS protests were eventually silenced by force, the movement fundamentally changed the landscape of Nigerian politics. The youths became more politically engaged than ever before, and new conversations about governance, accountability, and leadership emerged. In a country with a median age of just 18, the youth are Nigeria's greatest asset, and NSAS showed that when young people stand united, they can challenge even the most entrenched systems of abuse and corruption. Segment 7. Global impact and youth movements. NSAS resonated globally, aligning with other youth-led movements like Black Lives Matter in the US. It proved that the fight against state-sanctioned violence is a global issue, and it inspired movements in other parts of Africa and beyond. NSAS wasn't just about Nigeria. It was a movement that reminded the world of the power of youth, the role of technology in activism, and the unyielding demand for justice. The NSAS protests may have been silenced, but their legacy lives on. Nigerian youths continue to demand change, and the world is watching. This movement has shown us that the fight for justice is never easy, but with courage, unity, and determination, the power of the people will always prevail. The power of youth movements is undeniable, and NSAS is proof of that. Thank you for watching today's deep dive into this historic protest. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments, because this story is far from over.